here are the semi-finals. Welcome to the semi-finals of GP Seville, ladies and gentlemen. It's my great pleasure to welcome you, Riley Knight, in the booth alongside Immanuel Gerschenson. Simon, such a pleasure to have your company as well.
Same.
So here on the screen you can see our two wizards bravely going forth to duel and do battle. We have Nicholas Merrian on the left and Immanuel Gerschenson on the right. Gerschenson on the blue-black control plan, while Nicholas Merrian falling back to a staple of the format in his only second GP appearance ever. He's made the top 8, Simon. Got to be impressed with his performance. And of course, Abzan mid-range, a deck that really needs no introduction.
No, and the Abzan whip in his deck really makes his deck a lot more potent in the late game than the general Abzan mid-range strategies.
For sure. I mean, we've seen the different ways that that Abzan can be built. A real myriad of different puzzle pieces to put together. Some of the most powerful cards in the format, in the form of Siege Rhino and friends. But there's by no means any fixture to the way that this deck has to be built, outside of course, that Rhino life.
But both Abzan and Jeskai have that property, whereas Sultai is more clearly defined, although now there's two decks with Sidisi Whip and Sultai Control.
Yeah.
And then Timur always looks very similar. You just want the 4-power creatures.
Of course, but much more fluidity when it comes to the Abzan deck, as we see a Thoughtseize is taking care of one of the cards in Gerschenson's hand. Interesting matchup here. You've got to think that the control player has the tools that they need to win the game, but is it as clear-cut as that, Simon?
It really depends. Gerschenson doesn't have the best early game with his deck, and the longer the game goes, the more favored he is. He's the true control deck of the format, so if the game goes long enough, he will win it. I also think that he's been playing this deck very well, considering that he just picked it up after Washington, headed to Sevilla, and basically is now in the top 4, might even make a run at winning another GP.
That's right. No slouch himself, Gerschenson. He won GP Madrid last year.
Yes, with a completely different deck too, Ruck Delver.
So showing his colours here as a very, very capable magician. Marion also, of course, no slouch, but someone with lacking experience and as a relative newcomer to the modern form of the game. I know he used to play back in Onslaught block, but it's been a while since he shuffled up some paper cards. Still, he's got to be happy about having made a top 8 at his second GP.
Yeah, and you can see that he isn't the fastest with his decisions, with his gameplay. So he has to think about even the first turns of the game more deliberately than somebody who has just played a lot more games of Standard. But I think his deck is built very well, and it does some surprises waiting for the opponents.
Yeah, for sure, especially with stuff like Whip of Erebos and that sort of stuff. You know, a few little silver bullets here and there as well. But I think you're very right. That observation's saying he's a very cautious, very methodical player, if you wanted to look at it like that. Certainly giving himself the highest percentage he can to win, as we see him double fetching here for 2 planes. Are we going to see a Brimaz King of Ereskos? That might be the case, as he takes one. No, he's going to take 1 point of damage. And here is Tassiger, the Golden Fang. My goodness me, a very, very strong play on turn 3.
And that's very, very interesting, because Marion opted to discard Silence the Believers, leaving Gerschenson with a Disdainful Stroke. But clearly Gerschenson wasn't expecting that he would have to Disdainful Stroke on turn 2. So he just played a Temple, and now there's a 6-drop in play.
That's a really good point. You know, often you're thinking, oh, well, I've got this Disdainful Stroke, so turn 3 or turn 4, I'm really going to get some value out of that. Not so, Mr. Secretary, says Tassiger the Golden Fang. That card, of course, absolutely being bananas. Here is Ashiok, the Nightmare Weaver, weaving away, finds a Brimaz, and Gerschenson shifts the turn. Tassiger as a 4-5, not able to take care of the Theros Planeswalker in one swing.
And Ashiok has won Gerschenson many games here this weekend, often because a lot of attacking power goes into defeating it. Sometimes you get some value out of it. We've seen Whisperword Elemental, for example, being also even Hornet Queen against Marsu Carvalho.
Yeah, crucially in the quarterfinals, Carvalho's own Hornet Queen was his undoing when Gerschenson used his Ashiok to put it to play.
And something nice from that game also was that Marcio decided to not attack Ashiok, but instead attack Gerschenson. And he was punished to the highest degree because Gerschenson found the Hornet Queen.
Yeah.
But I still think that he might have been one of the very few opponents of Gerschenson this weekend that actually made the correct call of not attacking Ashiok.
Siege Rhinoceros, we've got a Fleece main line and a Hero's Downfall entering the exile zone thanks to the Ashiok activation there. Fleece main line also hanging out on the battlefield. Old mate Fleecey there doing his best Nick Watson impression with that haircut. There's a Bile-Blight getting rid of the aforementioned Fleece main lion. And here's a Radiant Fountain, a card that I'm certainly a big fan of. Going to gain Gerschenson 2 life. Shifts the turn back to Merrian, who untaps. He's got his 4-5 at the ready. Can take care of Ashiok this turn as long as there's nothing standing in the way. Planeswalker down.
That's another 8 life gained,
yeah,
effectively.
That's a really good way to look at it, Simon, in the sense that the blue-black control player, all they want to do is get to the late game. And even if Ashiok is just soaking up damage like a sponge, it's enabling Gerschenson to get to that later stage of the game.
And 8 points is a lot if you're Abzan mid-range. It's not like the damage just manifests out of thin air.
Interesting to see that Merrian's on 13 life.
Yeah, that's what the pain lands do to you. I'm always waiting for these players to okay, draw step. So Merrian has drawn the Absent Charm.
Yeah.
Immanuel is stopping him in his draw step because he might want to destroy Corsair of Krufix to deny Merrian the Caves of Koilos.
That's right, of course. Not the way it goes this time, but a very pertinent point all the same from Immanuel Gerschenson. Often players will wait to the draw step to kill the Corsair of Krufix if it's going to die that turn anyway, so they get the extra information. In comes Tasiga along with the Corsair. That's 6 points right there, served up hot and fresh for Gerschenson. He's down to 16. Jace's Ingenuity. I can get behind this card. 1, 2, and 3 cards entering the hand of Gerschenson. He's got to be happy with that.
And the game is proceeding exactly like he wants it to go. Soaked up 8 damage with the Planeswalker, is at 16, facing down only 6 points of damage. And Merrian had no plays, so he was free to tap out for Jace's Ingenuity.
Yeah, we're slowly transitioning towards the later stages of the game here. The mid game is more or less at its point here, and we're going to get to the point where Gerschenson is really able to wrest control of the game away from Merrian. So Merrian's really got to dig deep and find some kind of agenda that's going to get him on the map in a relevant way.
Well, which is difficult because Gerschenson already has his counter wall up. Now, the question is if Tazigur's activated ability has much of an impact here. Not so sure about that.
There's a Crux of Fate, so that's going to clear the board. We're going to see a Tasigur activation before that.
Yeah, there's an unfortunate bit of glare, so I can't really...
I know there's a Fleece main line.
It has to be Fleece main line.
Yeah.
That was the target of Bile-Blight.
Yeah.
So the real question is if Merrian wants to activate Tasigur to get Fleece main line or a random card from his graveyard, or if he maybe wants to draw 2 with Absent Charm, something that I'm a big fan of.
His hand at this point, however, isn't the strongest it could be. He's got a Hero's Downfall, which he might be able to get some utility out of, but a Bile-Blight barely does anything against Gerschenson.
Yeah.
It's almost a blank.
So he does get back Fleece main line, milled another one.
So Tasigur replacing itself, at least. Here's a card with Merrian, and that is Urborg. Urborg, a card with some pretty interesting implications, but I think at this point, with the amount of black sources that Gerschenson has, I don't think it's going to disadvantage Merrian too much to play it.
No, especially because Gerschenson is much more limited in blue mana in most games. Not in this one, though. There's 3 duels already.
It's always a nice feeling fetching out those islands when you've got an Urborg in play.
Yep, Underground Sea.
Underground Sea, just like that in Standard. Who knew?
Merrian has 6 mana, and if he had 7 this turn, an interesting line would have been to play Fleece main line and just monsters immediately.
Yeah.
Basically play it as a 7 mana hexproof indestructible creature. He didn't, so I expect him. Oh, is this somebody opting not to cast Abzan Charm again?
We've seen this time and time again, and I can see the rage, the rules, the lines of rage etched upon Immanuel Gerschenson's tired face as he sees another player fail to draw 2 cards with the Abzan Charm. That Sign in Blood mode crucial.
Failed to draw. Failed to draw cards when you could. The worst offense.
Oh, the worst offense. The worst offense of all. Gerschenson succeeds in drawing a card. He's found a polluted delta. Is that a Perilous Vault in his hand? That's
he has
a hand.
Perilous Vault. He's setting up Dig Through Time, a very cheap one, and he has the Pearl Lake Ancient as well.
So not even too worried about a monstrous Fleece main line because a Pearl Lake Ancient, a Perilous Vault's going to very handily take care of that.
Yeah. Now with Ugin in the mix as well, there is definitely more answers to a hexproof indestructible creature than there was previously. You can now exile it with Perilous Vault, but you can also exile it with Ugin, the Spirit Dragon.
Yeah, that's right. A couple more answers available for the blue-black control. I'd like to take a moment to please apologise to the viewers at home for the situation with the light in the room. We've had a number of lights just sort of switch off out of nowhere. We're trying to get that problem solved, but I can tell you now that the GP hall is a little dimmer than it was moments before. Hopefully we can get that issue resolved. But in the meantime, strain those eyes and continue following all this standard action coming at you from around the world, wherever you are. We're certainly very glad that you've chosen to spend some time with us as we uncover the latest and greatest developments in Fate Reforged Standard.
Gerschenson feels forced to Bioblight Fleece Mainline in response to the monster's activation. So despite having the Perilous Vault in play, wants to make absolutely sure that at least that Fleece Mainline doesn't become monsters. I also count 6 cards in Gerschenson's graveyard now.
That's a curious number.
That's a curious number.
That's a curious number to have.
One away from the threshold, but more importantly, it's exactly the number you need to dig through time, of course.
Here is Abzan Charm. What's he doing with that one?
Drawing 2 cards.
You reckon? Sign in Blood. 1 and 2 cards. Here they come. Looks like he found 2 lands there. I saw a Windswept Heath and indeed a Llanowar Wastes. Not the cards he's looking for at this point. He does have Siege Rhinoceros in his hand, but it's hard to play that into open mana. Here's Dig Through Time. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and the final 2 paid with those dismal backwaters. Dig Through Time. What's he got? Grab that shovel out. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, 6, 7.
I'm not sure what Merrian wants to accomplish by waiting here. There's a Perilous Vault in play, and Gerschenson is in a position where he's never going to have to tap out of Karna Magic again. So you in a sense have to go for it and hope that at least the Rhino maybe trades for the Perilous Vault, because as long as that is in play, most of your big spells won't really affect the board.
So 3 mana here. Are we going to see a Divination? No, it's an Ashiok.
It's Gerschenson might be setting up for the play of at some point minusing the Ashiok to get a creature, and in response pop the Perilous Vault to wipe Merrian's side of the board.
Yeah, a little corner case scenario there that can come up, but still very relevant, almost like a little plague wind that's going to leave you with a relevant threat afterwards. Here's Heroes Down, an otherwise dead card, sort of baiting out some counter magic, but no, Gerschenson doesn't go for it. So Merrian draws Sandstep Citadel. That's not what he wants to see. He's got a Bioblight that's been in his hand since goodness knows when, and a Siege Rhinoceros as well. The Rhino life not getting him here at the end of the day.
It looks like he's playing around the Disdainful Stroke that he knows his opponent has, or maybe suspects.
Here is another Dig Through Time. How about we see what's going on the top of Gerschenson's deck. 7 cards. Let's have a look.
At least 1 dissolve. Maybe dissolve in a removal spell.
While he's in the tank about that, let's check in with the Flying Belgian. Morone Libera zoomed over to give us an update.
Talking about a flying Belgian, we got a flying Frenchman winning his first game of the semifinals over Garcia Ballester. Turns out that when the ground is locked up by rhinos and elementals, Wingmate Rock is still a pretty good creature and it flies over pretty much everything. So first game to Pierre Summon and well on his way to the finals.
Well done indeed to Pierre Summon. We saw him in the previous match beating Martin User, and Wingmate Rock doing a lot of work for him. So well done indeed. The Abzan aggro deck getting up over Green Red Devotion. But back to our the match at hand. Here is Siege Rhino. 3 cards in hand for Merrian with, 4 with this Siege Rhino in the stack. We can see a second Siege Rhino in his hand. Gerschenson with a Pearl Lake Ancient and a couple of other cards. A Dissolve amongst them, Simon?
Yes, but also a Disdainful Stroke. So he only lets cards resolve that he wants to see on the battlefield. He also has the Pearl Lake Ancient, so there's really no danger here.
Another copy of Llanowar Waste entering the battlefield for Merrian. The writing is on the wall at this stage for the young man from Guernsey. However, he's going to play it out. Of course, no time limit on these finals matches. As Gerschenson considers what he's up to. Flash in an Ancient, perhaps.
It's not an easy spot to play optimally in. On the other hand, Gerschenson has very few ways to actually lose this particular game, with the backup from Perilous Vault and the basically unkillable Pearl Lake Ancient. He doesn't want to get in a position where he might be forced to return 6 lands to his hand, because that could stifle his development sufficiently. But look at his hand. If you are holding a Pearl Lake Ancient and 3 counter spells, then you can actually race your opponent quite effectively. And what is Merrian going to do? If he wastes his removal spells on the Ancient, then he's going to be run out of cards.
Yeah, Gerschenson certainly in a very, very commanding position, which brings me great joy as a control player. Very happy to see these sorts of decks at the top of the tables. Merrian looking to cards in exile. Ships the turn. Gerschenson's going to untap, draw a card, find out what he's got up his sleeve for this turn. In comes the Pearl Lake Ancient. 6 damage at your face. How you like them apples? With all manner of blue instant nonsense in his hand to continue his quest for victory. Good to see Bileblight finally cast, perhaps? Yes, indeed. There we go. The world's worst fog.
Well,
not even fogging entirely.
Not right now. Yeah, there's something else has to happen, and Gerschenson still has full control, of course, over what's going on here.
I think you just let this resolve.
Yeah, I mean, you aren't really too unhappy if you have to return the Pearl Lake Ancient to your hand. On this battlefield, on the other hand, you do want to pressure Merrian, and if you counter, you actually have 7 power. So with prowess, you're actually threatening lethal next turn, which could be a consideration if you have 3 counter spells anyway. This reminds me of the Pearl Lake Ancient battles that you can win with Bileblight.
Yeah.
If you both have the Pearl Lake Ancient, you just play the Bileblight for the additional power.
So, Gerschenson happy enough to return it to his hand. We're going to see a couple more mana tapped here probably, and it's going to re-enter the battlefield in the middle of combat. Oh no, here there is an activation of the Pearl Lake of the Perilous Vault rather. Just going to take care of that Siege Rhino. Pearl Lake Ancient remaining in Gerschenson's hand for the foreseeable future. Here's Radiant Fountain. Take Gerschenson back up to 13. You've got to think that the game is getting more and more out of reach with every slight increase like this. Oh, that wasn't a Pearl. That was, I'm sorry, that was Urborg. Tomb of Yorkmoth. But a Radiant Fountain in Gerschenson's hand nonetheless. Here's Siege Rhinoceros number 2. And here is Disdainful Stroke, a number 1. Such disdain for the Rhino. No respect whatsoever. Away goes Disdainful Stroke, away goes the Rhino. Merrian with Abzan Charm and another card. Gerschenson draws. He's found another land. It's going to gain him one more life, up to 12. It's back to the point where he can flash in the Ancient if he so chooses. As Merrian doesn't activate the, doesn't use his Abzan Charm to draw cards. Looks like he might be wanting to exile the Pearl Lake Ancient. He draws a card for the turn. Finds a Temple of Plenty. Scry one. He's having a good old think about it. Is there a way out of this game?
It depends on your version of Abzan midrange. We know that Merrian has the Whip of Erebos, so if he could force Gerschenson to counter a sufficient number of spells and then top deck into Whip of Erebos, that would be a way to go about things. But then you just need to be aggressively drawing cards with Abzan Charm.
His Hero's Downfall. And that's going to mean a dissolve. So Gerschenson tapping out at the moment.
That just shows you how far ahead Gerschenson is, because he can actually afford to make these kind of plays.
Yeah. Yeah, not interested in setting himself back a little bit further. Not that it would ultimately make it a huge amount of difference as he scries, leaves a card on the top, by the look of things.
Now Merrian could now draw two with the Abzan Charm while Gerschenson is still tapped out. And if he draws a removal spell, then he could fire that off at the Ancient to delay things a little bit.
Yeah.
But the pressure is actually quite relevant here.
In for 6. Abzan Charm, draw 2, lose 2 life. What do you think, Gerschenson? That's fine, he says. You're down to 6. That's dead in 1 hit from the Pearl Lake Ancient. So let's find out what he's got against basically infinite mana, untapped on Gerschenson's side. There's a Valorous Stance. That can delay things for 1 turn. Here's Sorin, the Solemn Visitor. That's going to have a very, very disdainful stroke pointed at it.
Yeah, anything that's remotely threatening to Gerschenson is being countered here, and he also doesn't need to really counter these kind of removal spells. You can just accept the fact that it'll delay your victory by a turn.
Here is Valorous Stance, targeting Pearl Lake Ancient in Gerschenson's upkeep. Going to force him to return it to his hand after having tapped some mana. We're going to see it replayed in Gerschenson's upkeep. 4 mana, 5, 6 and 7. So, handily buying himself an extra turn with the Valorous Stance, there's Imon, and also tying up a fair bit of Gerschenson's mana. Ships the turn back, so only 5 lands up, but still a grip full of cards. Merrian draws. Is there a way out of it? A rather despondent shuffling of the cards in his hand. Was that a Courser of Prefix? Has he drawn his Whip of Erebos? All of these questions and more will soon be answers here at GP Seville. We are, of course, in the semi-finals, as you can see on your screen. Nicholas Merrian on Abzan mid-range. He's facing down Immanuel Gerschenson, a GP champion. Here's Courser of Prefix. Sure, says Gerschenson. What's on top? Elspeth, Sun's Champion. That's a card.
Merrian just getting out of range of the Pearl Lake Ancient, threatening to theoretically minus Elspeth to kill Pearl Lake Ancient, which, as we already know, would only force Gerschenson to put it back into his hand. Could also try to block the Pearl Lake Ancient indefinitely. All of these things probably not mattering, because there's no reason for Gerschenson to let Elspeth even resolve. That could actually be lethal here.
Is there a way for Merrian to prevent the attack? No, there is not. So there we go. Immanuel Gerschenson taking out Game number one, very, very handily there on the back of his Pearl Lake Ancient, but of course Merrian putting up a fight to the very, very end. We're starting game number two across the way in our live look in Pierre Sommen against Ballesta Garcia over here. We've got Pierre Sommen on the left of your screen. He's playing Abzan Aggro, Ballesta Garcia on green-red Devotion, as you can see, with a very telltale voyaging setter there, Immanuel Gerschenson.
Yeah, and the red cards have worked quite well for Garcia, with Stormbreath Dragon being, I think, the most impressive card because of its haste.
Yeah, certainly adds a new dimension to the green decks. But one of the other cards that I've been discussing with, or the type of card I've been discussing with you and Marine this weekend, has been the role that the red splash enables the green deck to add burn, which is a very useful answer towards planeswalkers, of course, and giving the deck a little bit of reach in the form of Kratos Claws and Lightning Strike. So Sommen is at 19 life, and his opponent Ballesta Garcia at 20. So in the opening stages of this game here, as you can see on your screen, but even with things like Lightning Strike, access to stuff like that, and Kratos Claws, it opens up a new dimension to the game. So Sommen draws a card. Looks like his hand is full of some very powerful gold cards. I see Siege Rhino. I see Anafenza the Foremost, which has come to the battlefield. That's going to cost him 1 life, but a 3-cost 4/4 with a relevant ability. My goodness me, he's off to a good start. Away goes the Wooded Foothills.
Yeah, Garcia actually hasn't done too much ramping so far. Voyaging Satyr, not really an all-star when it comes to mana production, unless Nykthos is involved.
Yeah. Yeah, a very, very difficult effect to replace with any other card. I mean, Kyora's Follower is going to do it to you, but abusing the ability in Nykthos is certainly made a lot easier by the Voyaging Satyr. Here's Whisperwood Elemental, a card that's got a lot of press this weekend, and a Manifest joining the battlefield as well. So 6 power for 5 mana, a resilient threat that has that opens up a lot of angles. Got to be happy to play that.
Also very valid just to trade off with Anafenza here. If Sommen doesn't have lands, his curve of Siege Rhino, Wingmate Rock, and Elspeth is just not going to happen.
You can see a Temple of Malady, so that's going to slow him down a little bit as we see an Abzan Charm on the top. That's not what he wants to draw. Leaves it on top all the same, shifts the turn, okay. So doesn't send in the 4/4. Garcia untaps. Whisperwood Elemental, one of those cards that really does spiral out of control, snowballing with the further manifests, and at really no extra cost, you're able to increase your board presence in a meaningful way, Simon.
Yes, and I'm kind of confused as to what Pierre Sommen's plan is here. You really want to draw lands. You can play the Siege Rhino, but if you had an untapped mana source, oh wow, there's a 4-power creature, so this is actually for 6. So Sommen with no easy way to save his creature with an Abzan Charm.
No.
Now Sommen left open the Bile Blight. That's probably hitting the Manifest. No, is he just not casting it?
It's going to cost him 1 to do so off the back of that Llanowar Waste, but no, he seems happy enough to just take it. And Garcia ships the turn.
Yeah, I really don't know what the game plan is here.
Manifests a card.
Oh, Sommen.
It's not going to work out how he hopes it
Yeah,
does.
that doesn't work. A judge should definitely step in there if
Okay, we're going to have
I don't think that's what should happen.
We're going to have to get that fixed up because a Bile Blight doesn't have the interaction that you'd think it would with Manifest. So we'll get that sorted out very, very quickly. Of course, Manifest being colorless creatures that don't actually have names, Simon, as I'm sure you're aware. They're just colorless 2/2 creatures without a creature type, a name, a color, or anything else, just power and toughness. So Bile Blight does not impact them in the way that they go. So that sheds a little light on what someone's plan was there. Unfortunately, not going to work out for him the way that he hoped it would. Judge there to sort out the problem.
The issue here is someone targeted one of the creatures and
he targeted the Savage Punch.
Okay,
yeah.
You saw it.
He targeted the Savage Punch, and the Lightning Strike that was later then flipped was the one that should remain.
Okay, I mean if they're both instants, it's most likely not going to matter. and they were revealed at some point, so that shouldn't really be a problem.
So the ruling from the judge has actually been that Bile Blight cannot legally target a manifest because it has no name.
That's
not, what we're hearing. We're not 100% sure on how that lines
Bile
up with
Blight
the
gives
rules.
a creature -3/-3.
We'll see exactly how that's going to work out here as this judge ruling unfolds, but the ruling is that it can't target it because it doesn't have a name. Not 100% sure as to that is, but that's under further investigation as we speak. Sorry for the break in the action, the non-stop action coming here from GP Seville at a little bit of a standstill. But I'd like to take the opportunity to thank you once again for choosing to share your time with us here on the stream. It's been a great pleasure to host this event for you all throughout the weekend, and alongside my steadfast colleagues Immanuel Gerschenson and Immanuel Gerschenson, truly a very keen pleasure to bring you some fantastic standard action from Spain. A beautiful venue, some fantastic players here, a really, really good atmosphere, of course. And it's nice to be out of Berlin, where it's about 5 below zero, I'll tell you that much.
It's been a pleasure so far, working with you, Riley.
Yeah, so far. So they're conferring with the head judge at this stage, and I'm very glad that you're giving me that little contingency rider there. It's been a pleasure so far, always playing around the future, Simon, of course, giving himself the opportunity to retract any statements without undermining himself. So as this issue gets sorted out, we'll see exactly how the judges rule. But it looks like in the bottom right-hand corner, where the players are approaching readiness in our original match. We've got, of course, Gerschenson playing Merrian. These guys getting ready for their match. We may head back there before too much longer once they're good to go. And I'm sure there'll be an update with the Bile Blight situation as soon as it comes to hand, my friends. Not in the business of keeping you in the dark, of course, with the head judge stepping in to sort that problem out. So, Merrian looking at his opening hand. We've got Gerschenson doing the same. Let's find out if he likes what he sees as we head back to our original feature match here. Gerschenson sitting on his 7 while he waits for Merrian to make a decision. Merrian deep in the tank here, of course. His back's against the walls, Imman.
Yeah, and mulliganing certainly doesn't help. He needs very specific cards, and he really, really wants to have a turn to Flea's main line, just to be the one with the momentum.
So we do have an official ruling from the head judge there. And it is, as we envisaged, the Bile Blight is, of course, allowed to legally target a manifested creature, but because it doesn't have any name, because the manifested creature doesn't have a name, it's not going to affect any of the other manifests on the battlefield. So just as we thought, Simon, just as you were saying, it is, of course, a perfectly legal target for the Bile Blight, but it's not going to have the knock-on effect that Bile Blight usually does have.
Also relevant if you face multiple Ash Cloud Phoenixes, for example. If they are face down, you can't target, you can't kill all of them with a single Bile Blight.
For sure, and a very interesting corner case that can come up sometimes if you're needing to get through those final points of damage through a couple of Sylvan Caryatids. You can, of course, target your own one if you have one, which will then kill all of your opponents. We're off to the races here with game number 2 between Merrian and Gerschenson. Merrian kicking things off with the Temple of Plenty, sending a card to the bottom, as is Gerschenson with his Temple of Deceit. Here's a Temple of Silence, all sorts of scrying going on. That's an Abzan charm. What does Merrian think of that card? It's just got 2 modes. You can put a +1/+1 counter on up to 2 creatures. And of course you can exile a creature with power 3 or greater. I don't think it does anything else, does it, Simon?
Sometimes you can also opt to draw 2 cards.
I haven't seen many players do that.
No, it's surprisingly...
It's the hidden mode.
Surprisingly rare.
It's like Azorius charm can actually give you a creature's lifeline.
Yeah. Okay, but this is the prime moment for Abzan Charm to shine. Drawing 2 in your opponent's end step That's something that not a lot of card draw spells do, actually.
Yeah. But he doesn't do it, and I can tell you now, a look of utter disdain etched upon Immanuel Gerschenson's face. He's hanging his head, he's shaking his head. He can't believe it. Down comes Sandstep Citadel.
Gonna have a disdainful stroke. So, yep, I mean, Merrian has the Siege Rhino in hand. Also, he has a lot of lands, and the Abzan mid-range deck, not particularly known for being able to convert these lands into business. I think Gerschenson is going to know Merrian's deck list, but still Whip of Erebos could be a key card here.
Yeah,
if Merrian actually wants to win this matchup.
Could be very, very problematic as he draws another Windswept Heath. He's got a Siege Rhino in hand, a Hero's Downfall, that stayed in after board. And what looks like 4 lands.
Yeah, so the Hero's Downfall, probably out of fear of Ashiok. But being scared, playing scared, sideboarding scared against blue-black control is not how you win the matchup.
Got to get on the front foot, got to be proactive, got to take the game to the opponent and really punish them in those early turns where they're not able to exercise a whole lot of power.
I think that Gerschenson doesn't even have the best hand. I see a lot of lands and Ugin, but all this time he's buying here is worth so much to him. He just needs to draw a dig through time, maybe a dissolve, and then he's looking very pretty.
Yeah, sitting pretty, absolutely. We've got an update from Moraine Liber, so it'll be good to catch up with what happened in that live look-in match.
Yeah, and Balester Garcia, he manages to win game 2 over Pierre Saman. When you guys went away, things weren't already looking too good for Pierre Saman, and then a Hornet Queen joined the board together with her little children. She manages to sneak out game 2 for the Spanish player.
There you go. Her Majesty the Arthropod managing to take away another game there. Thanks for the update, Moraine Liber, as we have a look now at what's going on. In our main match, looks like a Thoughtseize is underway, Simon.
Yep, Merrian delayed his spells until he could Thoughtseize, so now he could clear the way for the Siege Rhino, but as you can see, at this stage in the game, Ugin looks a lot more threatening than Disdainful Stroke, and even the Perilous Vault is more than a Time Walk. It's a Time Walk plus a Wrath effect for Gerschenson.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, all of those 3 cards present a unique problem for Merrian, one that isn't easily solved with 1 card, and any way you slice it, really, Merrian is looking at a bit of a maze, a bit of a labyrinth here to find his way out of this.
If he takes the Disdainful Stroke here, that's it's the play that makes the most sense. That's what he has been working towards. He's been working towards resolving the Siege Rhino. And then Gerschenson has the ability to spend a lot of mana to trade Perilous Vault for Siege Rhino. That's also a good exchange for Merrian. However, Merrian really needs to find something to deal with Ugin. Yeah. Best before it comes down, or maybe the turn when it comes down.
He does have a Hero's Downfall in his hand.
Yeah, but then he kind of doesn't want to have a board that gets exiled at that point. So, and that's kind of difficult to play, because if you don't have a board, Gerschenson is not going to tap out for Ugin.
Yeah, it comes back to that idea that we've discussed this weekend about who blinks first, basically, and the sequence of cards, the order they're played in, really, really crucial in determining who comes out on top. So, yeah, Merrian really facing a sticky wicket here as a Perilous Vault comes down.
The way I like to think about this is who allows which player to spend mana in which part of the game, in which phase of the game.
So I see a Whip of Erebos in the hand of Nicholas Merrian. So assuming the Perilous Vault takes care of the Siege Rhino, he's going to get a window to resolve that card.
Yes, but this is one of these spots where Gerschenson is not forced to pop the Perilous Vault just because he's taking 4 a turn.
Yeah.
He can wait until his end of turn. He can spend the Hero's Downfall. He can basically take 4-8 damage before actually popping the Vault. And all of that is buying him the time that he needs. And at some point, let's see what happens. Maybe the Hero's Downfall?
Looks like 3 mana.
If he waits with the Perilous Vault 1 more turn, then you actually have the 8 mana required to have Perilous Vault, but also counter backup.
That's very true. So away goes the Siege Rhino, and here comes a Thoughtseize.
That's a key Thoughtseize. That was basically the turn he needed to draw it.
So we see in Gerschenson's hand, Ugin and 3 lands. So the choice very, very easy for Merrian. And as you say, really, really crucial. Timed really well, and this game has been had new life breathed into it.
So we have Merrian with Downfall against Gerschenson with a Vault and no cards in hand. Well, no non-lands in hand. However, I still think that Gerschenson is favored simply because he has the blue card draw spells in his deck.
Yeah, I think his deck certainly has the ability to go bigger and longer. 4 mana. What's he got?
Looks like Tazigor, the Golden Fang, and
I think it is indeed.
it's kind of awkward to play it with Perilous Vault out already.
There it is. B-A-N-A-N-A-N-as. Bananas, that card. Absolutely. There we go. It is the 4/5. It only costs 4 this time. He chooses to exile 2 cards from his graveyard. That's going to power out a pretty significant undercosted threat there. And also leaving himself open to activate Tazigor's ability, which will give him either a Disdainful Stroke or an Ugin, undoing some of the good work done by those Thoughtseizers.
I'm actually not sure why Gerschenson would keep the Disdainful Stroke in his graveyard. At that point in the game, making Dig Through Time cheaper is not a high priority, but if you had the choice to get Ugin or Disdainful Stroke back, you would always want to get the Ugin, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I would have exiled either the Disdainful Stroke and kept the land, or just tab 1 less mana for Tazigor.
Activate the ability. Mill 1, mill 2. I can see a Crux of Fate and a blue card underneath it. There's a Dig Through Time. So one of those cards is going back to Gerschenson's hand. It's going to be Crux of Fate. Yeah, he's got a little bit of redundancy with the sweepers now, so, you know, giving him access to another sweep effect isn't the most devastating thing in the world. Hero's Downfall on the Tazigor. Away it goes. So Gerschenson back to an empty board with Perilous Vault. Can't argue with that position.
This is a stage where you aren't happy with arbitrary spells on top of your deck. You really want to get you ahead.
Mm-hmm.
I think Ashiok would still count. Card draw spells all count, but clearly you wouldn't want to have another Mass Removal on top of your deck.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you've got to be a little bit more discriminating in the answers you're seeking. And Merrian just ships the turn back. He's an unhappy chappy as we see a Dissolve enter the hand of Gerschenson, as well as the aforementioned Crux of Fate. Looks like an Urborg is in there as well, but he's got to be happy to have that Dissolve.
Yeah,
Always nice to have
Merrian
it.
has about the same number of lands as Gerschenson, and that's not a good sign.
Away goes the Windswept Heath. Merrian down to 16. Siege Rhinoceros off the top. Thoughts?
I think that Merrian is still holding the Rip of Erebus, and he kind of has this plan to get rid of the Perilous Vault first, or maybe did we miss that? I'm not quite sure what's in his hand.
Down comes Siege Rhinoceros. I think he's got a whip in his hand.
So if that's the case, he's been very patient with that, which I like.
That's an utter end as well.
It's just so hard to play control against blue-black control. It's just not the position that you want to be in.
There's a Crux of Fate. Takes care of that Rhino. So still, with the Perilous Vault threatening to blow up all non-land, or exile all non-land permanents. There, however, is utter end. So it looks like our hero Nicholas Merrian is wanting to resolve his the Whip of Erebos next turn. However, Gerschenson may have something to say about that because he does have a Dissolve in hand. Merrian being very cautious and very careful, as you mentioned earlier, Simon, in navigating this this matchup, and I think his care gives him every opportunity to reward it.
Especially after sideboarding, when there are a lot fewer dead draws in Merrian's deck, as opposed to game one, where at some point you just start drawing too many removal spells that you can't really deal with.
So Disdainful Stroke taking care of that Whip of Erebos. Gerschenson not even having to use his Dissolve. Merrian deciding it's time to pull the trigger with the Whip, and unfortunately for him, not quite getting there.
Let's give Gerschenson credit here as well. He's playing this as a blue-black control player should.
Absolutely, yes.
He's very aware of what to counter, when to protect his vault, when not to, and just knew that letting the other end resolve would be the correct way to play.
That's right. It was being able to get the read in your opponent, realise that the other end on that perilous vault is attempting to bait something out there. Ultimately, a pretty good play from Gerschenson. Well done indeed to him. As we see Merrian drawing 2 off an Abzan Charm and then drawing another 2 off an Abzan Charm. You've got to be happy about that, Simon.
Yeah, this is how you get back into this. If you just chain Abzan Charms and then suddenly Gerschenson, oh look.
That's exactly what he's done now. Very, very well called indeed. However, he hasn't drawn much else. He just drew 2 lands and then a third land in addition to the Abzan Charm.
Yeah, let's see if he has fetched all the basics out of his deck already. I think that would be something to a tiny improvement.
Merrian.
Yeah,
as Gerschenson ships the turn. Here's another Sign in Blood.
Something I don't understand is why you would pass the turn there. I see very little upside to passing the turn with that much mana up. I would have just basically slammed the next card that I drew also. It might have been it might be a bit better against this card, but still.
So, a very interesting sequence of cards coming your way from Nicholas Merrian. First of all, it is a Thoughtseize. He also has Sorin Solemn Visitor in his hand in addition to Elspeth. So we're going to see some counter magic here. It looks as if we are. There's a Dissolve on the Thoughtseize. So, just as Immanuel Gerschenson said, Abzan Charm enabling Merrian to actually open up a new avenue here, and we'll see how he's going to go here. He has more than enough mana to cast all of the cards in his hand. Here's Sorin Solemn, well, that is easy for me to say. Sorin Solemn Visitor. That resolves. A 2/2 coming into play as well. Does he extend further and play the Elspeth here?
I think he passed. I think that he should play the Elspeth though. Pearl-like Ancient is a very real threat, and you're still playing around Crooks of Fate very effectively with Elspeth. Only another Perilous Vault would punish you. Clearly Ugin as well, but the Sorin is not getting it done. No,
that's true, and we've already seen the one Ugin in the battle in the graveyard. If there's a second one, I mean, there is the chance that there's the second one.
Also evolved in Exile Zone already, so I think you just have to hope that your opponent is sitting on these Crux of Fates, maybe.
Yeah.
And in a sense, you have to hope that it's Pearl-like Ancient rather than Ugin, and against Pearl-like Ancient, this play is rather weak. If Merrian wants to pass here, yeah.
It seems he has, yeah.
Ugin off the top. Merrian being quite rewarded for waiting with Elspeth here.
So here is Ugin. Merrian knows something we don't, because there you go, the second Ugin. Gets rid of Sorin with the activation of his first ability, leaving the vampire in its wake. Gerschenson down to 4 mana. Merrian, is that a Crux of Fate in his hand? Surely not.
Destroy all dragons to get rid of Ugin.
Oh.
Doesn't work though.
Doesn't work though. It should. More egregious flavor violations brought on by this semi-final. It's a Thoughtseize. That seems rather more sensible.
Yeah, it doesn't protect yourself from opponents top decking Ugins though.
No, that's true.
Merrian not even trying to attack the huge loyalty on Ugin here. Passing again?
No Elspeth for the second time. Surprised not to see the Thoughtseize there as well. Any reason for not Thoughtseize into Elspeth there?
I think he doesn't want to expose Elspeth to the -6 that Gerschenson has available. if Ugin just deals with the Vampire here and you draw a Hero's Downfall, you still have a potential turn of Thoughtseize, Downfall, Elspeth.
That's a great turn.
If you resolve Elspeth here,
Yeah.
it you can't win, I think.
It doesn't do much, for sure. So, Merrian scries, leaves a card on top. My gut tells me that it was a Tasiga. Thoughtseize in his hand, along with Elspeth, Sun's Champion. Thoughtseize you. In the immortal words of Reduke. What are we seeing here in response? There's a Pearl Lake Ancient in response to the Thoughtseize. Not going to take that bad boy away, says Gerschenson. What would you like? My Silence the Believers or my Crux of Fate? I've got my 2 win conditions in play. What you got, homeboy?
Yeah, Merrian is not happy about this. I think you actually take the Silence the Believers because it's almost better than a Wrath at this stage of the game. I heard some clapping.
And Merrian Liberia is dancing his way over to the booth to let us know. It sounds like we may have a result from the second table. Is that the case, Merrian?
Yes, Pierre Summon cannot be stopped. Turn 3 Anafanza, turn 4 Siege Rhino, turn 5 a little Planeswalker Sorin there, and that's all she wrote. Pierre Summon, the Frenchman, goes to the finals where he will probably be meeting Immanuel Gerschenson. I guess you guys are looking at the final turns of that match.
Yeah, absolutely right. So thanks so much for that update there from Merrian. It looks like we've got an Abzan aggro deck into the finals of GP Seville. Stay tuned to see exactly what happens afterwards when we find out who's going to be in the final meeting up against the Frenchman. At the moment, Merrian in the process of resolving an Elspeth. Deciding to go down to take that Pearl Lake Ancient off the battlefield.
Yeah, he loses the Elspeth to Ugin either way, but here it's actually rather easy for Gerschenson to kill it. Could actually just go for the ultimate also. I would expect just a 3 damage shot at Elspeth, and then Gerschenson is still free to drop Pearl Lake Ancient again.
Exactly as predicted. We can see Elspeth not returning to Merrian's hand. He just happens to have all of his graveyard there at this stage. Triplicate Abzan Charms at the top of his graveyard. As Gerschenson chips the turn. That is a truly colossal Ugin there with 13 loyalty. Merrian draws what looks like a Tasiga.
I think we might be seeing an Ugin ultimate again.
Just quietly?
Yeah.
Just quietly.
Draw 7?
We may indeed. Draw 7. There's only one amount that's better than drawing 7.
Draw 7, put 5 lands into play.
That seems pretty good. It does seem pretty good. Merrian's in a position where he can play Tasiga and activate it several times, up to 3.
That's why he took his time to decide what to exile.
Yeah.
You really need to make sure that you only have the cards that you want left.
It looks like he's pretty hot on those Abzan Charms. He wouldn't mind drawing a couple more of them. What's he left in his graveyard? Abzan Charm, Abzan Charm. Is that another Elspeth there? Yes. Sorin, Whip, a couple of Rhinos. Those Windswept Heath aren't going anywhere.
Not a bad collection of cards.
And an Utter End as well. And what looks like a Hero's Downfall. So, pretty powerful cards heading back into Merrian's hand should this Tasiga resolve and the associated ability alongside with it. He's going to have to tap another green there if he wants to activate the ability. Corrects himself. There it goes. Takes 1 from his Lana War Waste, of course. And 2, Valorous Stance and Lana War Waste head into his graveyard. Valorous Stance, a card that doesn't do a lot at the moment. I suppose that the indestructibility will counter a Crux of Fate.
Yeah, or you can threaten Pearl Ancient for a turn, but overall, not what Merrian wanted to see here.
And we see him, we see Gerschenson indeed selecting to send back the Valorous Stance. Another activation of Tasiga. 1 and 2, Hero's Downfall, and a Fleece main line. Old Fleecy heading back to the hand. Fleece main line not matching up particularly well against Ugin, of course. Still able to be exiled regardless of how monstrous the Fleece main line gets. It's still hitting the exile zone with that minus ability from Ugin. There he is in all his glory, Ugin the Spirit Dragon. Hugely impactful planeswalker. A lot of people very skeptical about the fact that it costed 8 Immanuel Gerschenson, but 8 seems to be achievable in Standard.
Absolutely. In Standard, the games are not particularly fast. Even the aggro decks play cards like Hortling Outburst on 3. That's not the fastest of clocks. And the decks that are really built to ramp up or to prolong the game can reach 8 mana rather easily.
Here's the Crux of Fate. Are we going to see it countered with Valorous Stance? What do you reckon?
I was expecting Merrian to just continue to Tasigur, but maybe he's realized that that's not going to be sufficient. If Gerschenson has a land drop here, Merrian also has to think about the Pearl Ancient. Yeah. Either way, I think that the Ugin has done too much work here. Gerschenson isn't going to -6, right? He just wants to ultimate.
Yep, there we go. That looks like...
Oh, he does? No, okay.
No, the ultimate. There we go, pointing out to the ultimate. So, draw 7, gain 7, put 7 permanent cards into play. That has got to feel good, Immanuel Gerschenson.
It does.
Speaking from personal experience?
I've ultimated Ugin, yes.
Yeah? Many, many times.
With Sultai control nonetheless, but it's a similar feeling.
So let's see what he's got to whack into play here. Mainly lands, I'll imagine. Maybe.
Pearl Ancient.
Oh, for sure. So, here we go. 1, 2 polluted deltas, a Radiant Fountain, a Dismal Backwater, a Swamp, an Island, and a Pearl Lake Ancient. Nice little 7 cards there.
You are, of course, aware, Riley, that Ugin's ultimate is the reverse of Nicole Bola's ultimate.
Absolutely, and nothing. It made me so happy to see that that lovely bit of symmetry there. Immanuel Gerschenson back up to 20. He has nearly every land in his deck on the battlefield, and he's also got his 2 win conditions. Merrian, though, digging in his heels and refusing to give up. Every bit as stubborn as you'd expect, fighting for his tournament life. But Gerschenson with a full grip, a huge presence on the battlefield. It's not looking good for the Abzan mid-range player to the left of your screen.
Gerschenson might actually be winning the matchup that's waiting for him in the finals. Abzan mid-range is exactly what Pierre Sommen is on as well. Well, maybe Pierre is a bit more aggressive.
I think he's playing the Rakshasa Death Dealers and the Fleece main lines that we saw in the quarters indeed. But still, the core of the deck, as we've mentioned, it remains the same: Siege Rhino, Abzan Charm, Hero's Downfall, these sorts of cards.
Yeah, but then it's going to be really interesting if the additional 2 drops might not make the big difference here. I wouldn't be surprised if especially Rakshasa Death Dealer, being able to regenerate from Hero's Downfall and Crux of Fate.
Yeah.
Just completely shaping the matchup in a different direction.
I think you're absolutely right with that observation. I feel like blue-black control is under the gun a lot faster with the Abzan aggro deck, with a multitude of 2 drops that are able to apply that early pressure. And as we've mentioned several times, like the blue-black control deck just wants to get to turn 5, turn 6, relatively unmolested, so it can start deploying its answers in a timely fashion and take control of the game. And Rakshasa Death Dealer really has a different thing on its agenda. It hits hard and fast, and it's also fantastic off the top on turn 8. So, Merrian and Gerschenson still working through the activation of Tasiga's ability. And as mentioned, Sorin not a hugely high impact card. And it's that has chosen to return to the hand of Merrian.
These Tasiga activations are a bit cumbersome to resolve if your graveyard is so large. And for Gerschenson, it doesn't matter too much what Merrian gets, but yeah, that's what we are working with here.
Courser of Krufix coming down for Nicholas Merrian. Gerschenson fetching out an island out of his deck. Not the size of his deck is getting smaller and smaller every minute. Here's a dig through time. It's going to reduce it by a further 2 cards.
Swoops up his whole graveyard. Only needs 6 cards, of course. I mean, Merrian is enjoying the airtime
absolutely.
he's still getting, but the board he's facing down is not a fair one.
No reason to concede, of course. Fight it out to the bitter end. Enjoy the semi-final, the experience of being at the top 8 of a Grand Prix. And of course, I mean, he walks away from this any way you slice it with a Pro Tour invite and a smile all over his face. He's going to go back to Guernsey a happy man, you'd imagine. But it's not over till the fat lady sings, so we'll see what happens with Gerschenson and how he's going to close this game out. Merrian flips the top card of his library to the Courser of Krufix. It's an Anafenza the foremost. Here's an Urborg, ships it back to Gerschenson. Really, really interesting to see the way that the lack of a time limit really allows the blue-black control player to grind it out.
Gerschenson was very quick in the Swiss.
Yeah, absolutely. We commented on that.
That was exceptional. We often see control players go into time because not only the decisions, but all the logistics and the handling just takes so much time. And Gerschenson was super fast. Maybe not super fast this game, but that's also Merrian playing very thoughtfully and methodically, especially with the Tasiga activations, taking a toll on both clocks, basically.
Here is a dig through time, and you can see the only card remaining in Gerschenson's graveyard, apart from that newly resolved dig through time, is an Ugin. So it looks like Gerschenson might be playing with the fact that maybe there's going to be another Tasiga around. Here's a Dissolve and another card to seal the deal. Yeah, there's a Tasiga.
Yeah, so if Gerschenson thinks that he can get back Ugin, he might actually -3 it to get rid of Courser and Fleece Main Lion, attack with his Proleg Ancient, and then drop a Tasiga. That would be at least threatening lethal in 2 turns. Gerschenson has to... Oh, okay, it's still on the stack, apparently. Gerschenson has to realize that he doesn't want this game to take forever. He wants to be comparatively fresh for the finals.
Yeah.
Right?
There's a lightning bolt upstairs thanks to the Ugin, 3 damage at Merrian's face. He's down into single figures now, down to 8 life. Jace's ingenuity going to pump up the Pearl Lake Ancient.
At this point, Merrian is hoping that Gerschenson decks himself before he can find the victory.
Here's a downfall that's going to pump the Pearl Lake Ancient to an 8-8 or an 8-9. Unfortunately for Merrian, that is the end of that. He's got no answer to the hero's downfall, and with the prowess triggers, that's going to turn the massive serpent there into a game-winning monster. So Gerschenson certainly taking his time in winning that game, but doing so in very convincing fashion. And that is the end of the conquest of the young man from Guernsey. However, look, you can see he's still got a smile on his face, very happy to be in a position to take his name to the PT, and Gerschenson equally as glad to still be in the hunt for his second Grand Prix title. As we